I'm David Liggett with datacenterHawk, and I am here in Salt Lake City with Align Data Centers CEO Andrew Schaap. Andrew, thank you for hosting us. Great
David,
to see you.
Likewise, once again, good to see you.
Absolutely.
What, second city this year you're going to have done?
I know, second city, and I think third time you have agreed to do this. So
Agreed.
I appreciate it. So it's fun to be in Salt Lake City. You all have your portfolio is growing. I mean, you're in Northern Virginia, Dallas, Phoenix. You just announced Chicago, which is really exciting. But I'm excited to be here and talk about what's happening in this market. And the first thing I want to know is, why did Align feel like Salt Lake City was a great market to invest in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ultimately it comes down to great customers that you work really well with sometimes ask you to come into new markets and help them facilitate a requirement. And that's what happened here is, Salt Lake City wasn't on our radar. We didn't have a plan to come here. We just had a great client that asked us to come take a look at this market. We liked what we saw about this market. They were willing to kind of lean forward with us, and we leaned forward with them. And it's been a great development ever since we took over the first brownfield about 500 yards away. And now we're in building 2 and soon to be building 3 and 4 here in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and I think this market's really interesting because of the TCO and the tax incentives and the things that large customers are looking for today. I mean, those seem to be the ideal characteristics for like where a company like yours would want to invest.
Sure, absolutely. Salt Lake City is really kind of a hidden gem. Great tax base, great work environment, good connectivity, good power costs, low natural disaster risk, great skiing, which is outstanding.
Sure. Yeah.
And obviously beautiful mountains behind us, which is outstanding. So it's nice to come to a place that's beautiful and thoughtful and things like that. But it's just a great city, and I think a lot of folks are waking up to kind of some of these great hidden gems, and especially when some of these large data center providers and operators and customers are looking to come into markets that for all those great baseline reasons, but then to come to a fun city, an enjoyable city, a place that people want to work and enjoy and maybe relocate to. We've just seen great success here.
Yeah, makes a difference. So talk about this campus. As we've seen data center development continue in markets across the U.S., the sub-markets are really important. Like where you choose to be is really an important part of the decision-making process. Why did this campus stand out to you?
Yeah, we looked hard. Our real estate team is phenomenal. I'd put them against any real estate team in the industry. We keep kind of a repository of brownfield, greenfields in most of the major markets that we're looking into. Yeah. This particular campus we had on our radar for a while, and it's got a lot of natural benefits and attributes. On-site dedicated substation that we own, which means we have control of our own destiny when it comes to utility and power, and then obviously cost of power. Some of the benefits get flowed down to our clients. So this site was great. It had an existing facility on it. It's actually Fairchild Semiconductor. If you remember Fairchild, you have to Google it. It goes way back in semiconductor manufacturing. But that first brownfield, we retrofitted, stood up, and fully leased that facility out in about 12 months, and then started on building 2. And building 2 has got tremendous leasing velocity on it already, and kicking off building 3 here in the next handful of days. And we've got a second campus in Salt Lake City that we really don't talk about too much.
Sure.
That second campus in Salt Lake City is a large client that we did a build-to-suit for that group as well. That wanted geodiversity, latency, sensitive applications, and things like that. And so we're seeing some of those big clients lean into this market. So lots of good bones, and then lots of extra land and acreage for us to continue to develop on. Yeah,
it seems like the expansion piece, whenever you do take over a brownfield, is such an important part, especially today as the requirement sizes have grown. So, a lot of times these requirements will get done, and it could take a whole campus unless you're thinking through the next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that is you've got to have very sophisticated capital, thoughtful capital. The capital has to understand the industry, what the industry is asking for. And I hate to use the term future-proofing. Everybody overuses the term future-proofing. But I really believe in the fact that this industry, I think everybody's used the phrase, which inning are we in? Which is probably the most overused question that gets asked on every panel in the history of mankind. And I remember being asked that question way back in 2006.
Sure.
And
we've
thought,
been playing baseball for a long time.
Yeah, and I think the best thing to say is this is more like cricket than baseball.
Sure.
And if you're familiar with cricket, it can go days, not a 2-hour or 3-hour game. Cricket can be continued the next day. So I think we're more likely in a game of cricket that is going to continue for a very long time. And so future-proofing around assets is really important if you're in that kind of industry.
Yeah, and 5 to 10 years ago, build-to-suits weren't as maybe mainstream as they are today. I mean, I think that the industry has certainly changed, and the larger clients in this market have changed as well. From your standpoint, talk about why that has happened, and also you mentioned capital, why having the access to capital is so important with those projects.
Sure. So build-to-suit, absolutely, you're 100% right. Build-to-suit meaning in the way we think about it, we call it build-to-scale. Yeah. We essentially have our same kit of parts that can work on distributed redundant, block redundant, different resiliency requirements that different clients have, from financial services all the way down to folks that want lab environments, which have very low resiliency levels. And so the ability to kind of use that same kit of parts with different client requirements and different needs is really critical. The other thing that's important is having a supply chain, and we call it vendor managed inventory, VMI. And our vendor managed inventory is very tight, very dialed in. And we started that way before COVID. Yeah. And then obviously when COVID hit, we were the recipients of a lot of tremendous opportunities and transactions in business. And that VMI really helped us win a bunch of those deals, facilitate those deals, be able to deliver quickly. But it not only helps with existing campuses we have, but those build-to-suit requirements that come up in a moment's notice, that we can find an asset, find a brownfield facility, find a piece of land, and then take all of our technology, all of our intellectual property, all of our vendor managed inventory and supply chain, and bring all that to bear against a project, and hopefully have a speed to market that's better than anybody in the industry, have a delivery mechanism that's very flawless and seamless for the client.
You mentioned build to scale. I think the first this is right, the first data center tour I ever went on, I think was with you when we were looking at a data hall that was 10,000 feet, maybe 1.2 megawatts. That was co-location back then. Talk about your build to scale and kind of the thought process behind being able to deliver something today that matches users' needs different than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, sure. 10 years ago.
And I kind of aged us.
Well, I was going to say, I think that tour was well more than 10 years ago, David, but I won't say how long ago it was for the sake of your audience, but it was definitely more than 10 years. So build to scale in our parlance is really making sure that we've got same kit of parts that we can use for different resiliency levels in different locations. And then obviously we have to take code compliance, jurisdictional requirements for different jurisdictions, particulate goals for different jurisdictions. Like Salt Lake City has a high particulate strategy here where they want us to, because we're basically in a basin here. And so we're using, kind of a top-tier generator and top-tier technology here because that's what the city of Salt Lake City wants from us. But above and beyond that, really having that kind of like standard kit of parts, great supply chain partners that we have good relationships with and keep really tight communication with, and then also pre-committing dollars to those supply chain partners. And that's something that, quite frankly, some of our competitors may or may not do. I think we do a pretty good job at really opening up the kimono to our supply chain partners, telling them what we're doing, how we're working, and really so they can forecast and predict their own manufacturing, their own supply chain, their own challenges that they have to make sure manufacturing is kind of smooth and they don't have those major spikes and major troughs in manufacturing. And all that translates into kind of a good supply chain partner downstream, all the way up into great customer experience for our end customers.
Yeah. Why is the approach to getting water out of the data center become so important for the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I think so. It's really been led by some of the most sophisticated clients on the planet, and those sophisticated clients have been talking about this for years. Which is electricity is very easy to understand where that electron comes from, and is it a green electron? Is that been produced green through sustainable practices? Wind, solar, hydro, things like that. When you get into the water scenario, it's really difficult to fully understand how the local municipalities getting that potable water. Are they using coal-fired plants? Are they using something else inside their supply chain to get that water to the site? Obviously, evaporative cooling has been around for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. Adiabatic has been around forever. The Native Americans were using it, obviously, way back when. So it's not a new technology. So at the end of the day, taking water out is really being a good steward to the environment, being a good steward to our community.
Yeah.
But it's also being a good reporting, so we're able to report. So we happen to use GRESB for our reporting for our green energy and how green we are in our standards. And GRESB, goes into all the details about how we build these facilities, how we operate these facilities. And water stands out as kind of an unknown, because you have to go into your local water municipality and figure out how they are actually developing the water. So what we've seen from our big customers is they want to steer away from water as much as possible. Because water is becoming more and more of a precious resource.
Yeah.
And whether you're in kind of the western states that are experiencing drought conditions, whether you're in Dallas, where you and I are from. But obviously using less water is just good for the environment. Even if you take a little bit of a PUE impact, most clients are looking at the PUE impact and saying that's an understood impact, and we understand that impact, and we're totally fine with that impact because we can actually understand every electron, everything that we're using throughout the entire operations of the facility. We can claim high degree of sustainability in the way we're operating that site, not only today, but for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And so we do it, and quite frankly, the way we've architected our solution without using water, with all the intellectual property that we brought to bear, has kind of created this environment where we're still able to get these really wide delta T's inside of our data centers. And the wider the delta T, the better you are on rejecting heat into the atmosphere, the better you are, using less energy. So we're still able to achieve market-leading PUEs in all of our facilities.
And that comes with a lot of forward thinking as related to design and relationships with customers, making sure that you have the same focus that they do. When you think about the industry 3 to 5 years from now, if you think crystal ball a little bit, what do you think are going to be the trends that are shaping what we're doing then? Yeah,
again, going back to the which inning are we in question.
Yeah.
I think foundationally, the electrical plug has been around for 100 years, and it's going to be around in 100 more years, right? That's not going away. What is changing is the way customers use the space. There is real concerns about densification, how they're densifying, and I think we talked about that in the early 2000s. We talked about that in the early 2010s, but we're really starting to see those clients. We've got clients inside of our portfolio now that are achieving 500, 600, 800 watts a square foot, 30, 40, 50 kW per rack.
Yeah.
That's unheard of.
Sure.
And so in the clients today that are operating at 12 to 15 kW a rack, they're talking to us about getting to that 20, 30 kW a rack in the next 3, 5, 10 years. And so again, not to use the term future-proofing, we've kind of coined the term expand on demand. And when we think about expand on demand, it's having the client be able to expand within the same footprint, expand their densities without taking more real estate.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to sustainability. If you think about it through the lens of what kind of makes us different, it's kind of that future-proofing, that expand on demand that we build into the data centers, all the way back to the first data center we built 7, 8 years ago. That was always kind of a theme that I had in my vision, is like, it's going to come, and clients don't always see it when they first come in, but they absolutely see it when they start to have refresh cycles.
Yes.
Right? They absolutely see it when they have changes, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures. They need new technologies being brought in, whether it's the real high density NVIDIA chips or some of the new chips that are coming out from AMD. Those guys they're pushing the limit, and they're trying to find co-location providers that can facilitate those 20 kW a rack, 30 kW a rack without exotic cooling technologies. And exotic is synonymous with expensive. Every time you have to call a plumber or an electrician, it's expensive. You've got to get, if you've got in-row cooling or in-rack cooling or things like that, not only are you having those plumb lines go to every rack, but that's expensive. And each one of those connections is a point of failure, and it has to be maintained. And then every time you have a refresh, you've got to call that plumber back out.
Yeah.
So all of our technology is outside the room. We never have to go in the room. We never have to, do a maintenance window for the client or anything like that. So it's quite a different approach, and kind of a vision I've had for years that this is something that the industry needs to take hold of, because it's not about the deal that you signed today or the transaction you signed today. It's really about the 3-year, 6-year, 10-year, all those refresh cycles that our clients are going to go through. And on the front end, clients look at it and they may think it's a sales pitch,
right?
And that's perfectly fine. But when they actually get into the refresh cycles and they get into those discussions later on, they start to see that. And so then, the Salt Lake City opportunity that brought us here, existing customer that saw what we were doing for them in another market, saw that technology, saw the way we were kind of doing that kind of future proofing for them, and believed that we had kind of a competitive edge, and kind of asked us to participate in a essentially a build to scale, build to suit in the Salt Lake City market. So that's the way I think the industry is going to trend in the future. I mean, ultimately, this is a capital-intensive business. That's not going to change. I think clients are continuing to drive more resiliency into their application, into their network. Obviously, some of the news over the last week has made everybody kind of look again at facility resiliency, application resiliency, and then kind of like double down on that, because it's when you have blips in applications, blips in network, blips in facilities, it really impacts a lot of folks, and the interdependencies between applications has become super prevalent as folks are using different cloud providers, different SaaS providers, different applications and service providers, different infrastructure providers, and they're pulling all that together into a kind of a heterogeneous application set, which if one thing has a blip, it can affect a whole bunch of other applications. So it really means that you've got to have best-in-breed systems, best-in-breed facility operations, really world-class operations staff, lots of training, because that training really kind of parlays into, like, you gotta have great infrastructure, but ultimately the guy that operates the site at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, he needs to know how to throw the switch, he needs to know how to run the systems, he needs to know how to run all those things. Sorry, he or she. And we've been really focused at Align on training, diversity and inclusion, and bringing in folks that are outside the data center industry, inside the data center industry. And so we've got a robust internship program, a robust training program, and I think that's something you're going to see also. All the big hyperscalers are talking about scarcity of talent. We definitely see scarcity of talent. We're all competing for talent. So I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see a kind of a renewed effort there too. On we can't just rely on people that have been in the data center industry for the last 20 years, like you and I have. Let's pull people from other industries in. Let's find ways to partner with local community colleges, trade schools, folks like that, and bring them in and train them up and introduce them to the wonderful world of digital infrastructure.
And it's such a great industry. I mean, I think about, since I stumbled into it when I did, I won't give the years, but just watching the changes that have taken place, and to your point, it still feels like there's a lot more to come. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for doing this and like hosting us here in the Salt Lake City Data Center. If you're out there watching, you need to come tour it, or you need to come and just take a look at the view, because both are great. So Andrew, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, David.